Thank you, Peter. That was outstanding. We've had a lot of comments and questions here today about getting people involved, and I think that was very, very important in the whole process. I'll talk a little bit about that. I love this format, by the way. Quick hitting, short presentations, different topics. So congrats to the people who put this together. This is fantastic. I thought when I first got this invitation, I thought this is personally pretty good for me. So Dwight Eisenhower and I have the same birthday. So the bad news is he was president when I was born. That's a long time ago. So a long way to go. I went and pulled a few quotes. So if you're a fellow, you probably have done a little research on President Eisenhower, and maybe you are familiar with these. The older I get, the more wisdom I find in the ancient rule of taking first things first, a process which often reduces the most complex human problem to a manageable proportion. In fact, we often talk about with city leaders when they go on this journey of being a smarter city is to do it in bite-sized chunks. You can't, the words, right? You can't solve world hunger. That big bang is difficult, right? Unfortunately, he also said, if a problem cannot be solved, enlarge it. So we're going to forgive him for that one, because we're going to go back to the first one. And then we heard a lot about planning today. In preparing for battle, as you know, he was a legendary general as well. In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So again, we heard all about questions from the audience. Who's been involved in this? Who did you ask? Are the people involved? Are multiple departments, agencies, and ministries involved? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. That process is good. And by the way, your comment on time. Time is not an enemy when it comes to planning, right? So what is resilience? And we were asked earlier, again, another question came up, is there a way, a short format for scoring things? And in fact, I believe we'll find out very soon the UN will come out with a resilience scorecard for city and public sector leaders to use as a guide to helping them in their journeys. So I'll let you read this, but it isn't just predictable events, but it's also the unpredictable, which we're getting better at, by the way. So chronic stress, think of where we are today, and my generation maybe has not done the best job with some of this, right? I mean, look at these numbers. And for those fellows in the room, this is going to be very quickly your problem. It is today, right? So when we joke in my home country, the U.S., when a president is elected, all the things he ran against the next day are he owns it, he or she owns it. And it becomes not President Clinton's problem, it's President Obama's problem overnight, right? And again, example from my country. There's also the acute stress. The good news here is on the bottom left is there's less human lives impacted. That's probably the nature of preparedness by itself. Maybe some of this is awareness, the 24-hour news cycle, the internet, availability of news around the world. But the fact is, it is getting a little more difficult out there. More people are affected as highly populated areas of the world become more and more affected by these things. We talk about, and I don't know if we've heard this term before, a system of systems. So there's multiple domains involved. It's not just let's build safe city streets and the infrastructure. There's multiple domains. And it is this system of systems. And we heard, again, about planning in the housing board here in Singapore. The planning was done not just with the housing people, right? It's in Tianjin, my goodness, I can't imagine the planning that went into that. So look at this from a vertical standpoint, but also think about it with this point of view, is that they're all interconnected. One thing that affects the other. So when it comes to disaster resilience, this ability to respond to a disaster, and maybe one you cannot predict, or even if you can predict it, it's coming your way anyway, and that's usually weather and things like that. How do you respond? How do you keep the city resilient and the business of being a city alive? More and more, we're contacted by our corporate partners not ones involved in smarter cities in my part of the world, but industrial sector companies, oil companies, industrial companies. They want to put their factories and their facilities in cities and countries that have resilient operations. So when the disaster strikes, and pick the part of the world, it's either hurricanes, typhoons, earthquakes, fires in the summer, but it's something's coming your way. They want to work and place that used to be just skills, maybe education for the employees' children. Now it's really, really, really about resilience, more and more. I think it's very appropriate that I'm following so many other speakers who were so excellent, and they talked about the hardware. Well, I will call it the social domain, the human assets. When we were asked to comment on some planning for resilience in some cities by the World Bank, and it's wonderful that the World Bank speaker will be here by video, one of the comments we made was, by the way, when the donor-funded organization, Asia Development Bank, World Bank, IADB, when they leave, the human assets have to be in place to take over. So not only is it building infrastructure, but it's building the skills and capabilities of the people, the engineers, the local capacity of skills, the skills of the future. They have the skills we need in the future. That's all part of the resilient process. It's not just, again, making it stand up to the fight, but it's being able to be resilient afterwards. This is an interesting story, only because these neighborhoods are almost right next to each other. One was a very transient neighborhood, and one was very long-time neighbors who sort of knocked on each other's door. And look at the difference there, just in a heat wave in those two societies. And it's not that the people were colder in the other one, it's just more transient and maybe without the tools of social tools that could have allowed people to maybe survive that. A horrible story, but a good lesson learned. I think we're going to be better at predicting these black swan events. We have to do something about that. You know, there's more, you've heard this, I know you've heard this, the industry that makes transistors, the Association of Companies, said there's more transistors manufactured every year than there are grains of rice harvested. Doesn't even make sense, does it? It's phenomenal. The prices are so low, we could censor, we could censor anything. So we have chips in a cow's ear that measures temperature, so you can segregate them from the herd if they get sick. So we're doing everything. So anything can be censored. So the buzzwords, you know them, big data, right? Analytics, that's what this is about. And we had a good conversation earlier about there's so much data available for cities today. Especially even the developed cities like Singapore, world leader in all this, right? There's so much information and data to make sense of that and do some predictive analytics around that. That's the IT world of today. And the technology's here. It's going to get faster. The pipes will get bigger. That's really not it. It's all here. We can do it today. And here's the big data part, and the part that I would comment on is the ability to do something without the big bang hard infrastructure spend. And I'll call that the soft infrastructure. Unlike PCs, you go into almost any financially difficult area of the world, I'll call it that, everybody's still got a phone. Everybody's got a phone. So there's a lot we can do with sensors, mobile devices, readiness, preparedness, pushing out information about health. We're talking in Africa about one of the big issues, as you know, with health is compliance to medicine. You know, the tuberculosis patient comes in, or just the bacterial infection patient comes in, and they get the medicine, but if they don't take it for 14 days, it's all coming back. So even compliance and pushing out reminders, did you take your medicine today? These are all public health issues that in the developing world are huge. So we can do some really interesting, cool things while we're planning the big play. Finally, I'll just leave you with one of the more bigger play examples. So Rio's getting ready for the World Cup is coming, the Olympics are coming, World Cup to Brazil, but the Olympics to the Rio area. They put together a disaster center, an operations center, which was really focused on their issue of floods right before around November or so. They have a real problem with flooding down the hillside. It's Rio has maybe the most beautiful setting for a city you could ever imagine. I mean, it's just gorgeous. But so many people living in the favelas, I think it's the slums down the mountainside, get just nailed with these mudslides. So the mayor said when he grew up, he actually lived in the U.S. state of Connecticut for a while, and he said, it was very funny, he said, you know, I was a schoolboy, and the mayor got on the radio and closed the city because of the snow, closed the schools. He said, I always wanted to do that, right? So he became mayor of Rio, closed the city because of the flooding, and basically told us in a meeting, he threw up his hand and said, so now what do I do? Do I call every department? What are you doing? And so he put together this operations center as a way to integrate the city in cases of emergency. That could be floods, that could be a civil unrest, whatever. But it's a chance to, again, because we all, it doesn't matter what country you come from, we all organize by financial silo. Police, fire, rescue, tax, housing, and this is a way to integrate the city. So I will close speaking directly to the fellows. You've heard a lot of senior leaders today, and I've got my gray hair, but this is your time. This is your time. So I know many of you are involved in your communities. You wouldn't be here if you weren't leaders, so that's kind of meets minimum. Take over, take it. Power is, nobody's going to give you power. Power is something you take. So get involved in your communities, find out what your cities are up to, be a leader there. We really do need you, because all these issues we talk about, we're going to leave them to you to solve someday. I'll be off wherever the Everland is. Thank you very much.